All right, for more on this, let's speak to Sami Hamdi, who is the managing director of the International Interest. Sami, always good to have you on the show. After years of economic stagnation, political paralysis, the president's intervention back in July appeared to have some sort of popularity at first. We're seeing now that it's lost steam. What does it show you?
I think it's important to remember that in this week, Kais Saied announced a ban on protests, and he also announced a ban on Friday prayers to ensure that worshippers would not take to the streets after their gatherings in the mosque. And he also banned political parties from speaking on national television, suggesting that he believes that his position is not yet secure to allow these protests to take place, and also believes that his claim that his coup is popular is essentially no longer true, or it's not true anymore, at least in that he cannot rely on the people to prevent these protests from taking place. I do know that the package said that it was Ennahda, or the largest opposition party, who took to the streets. I think that's not entirely true. There was also Ghazi Shawashi from Tayar Demokrati, the Liberal Party, who originally supported the coup. There were also those from Muwatinun Didd al-Inqilab that include the likes of Jawhar bin Barak and Habib Bouajela, who are known to be opponents of Ennahda. They also took to the streets as well against this coup. But what it shows us is that Kais Saied now is only in power because of force. He's in power because of the security forces. And that's why we saw chants today at the protests of, oh, security of the state, i.e. emphasis on the state. Do not follow the whims of the dictator. The people calling on the security forces to do their duty towards the people and not towards Kais Saied. But it's also important to stress that these protests in and of themselves do not necessarily hinder the coup, albeit they do demonstrate that Saied is not as strong as he appears. But rather, Kais Saied, when you look at the initiatives that he has embarked on, suspending the constitution, suspending parliament, and then receiving a nod from Washington, which approved of his roadmap in which he would unilaterally write the constitution, unilaterally write election laws, and then conduct elections on 17th of December. For Kais Saied, when he looks at the bigger picture, he will believe that his coup is at least continuing as it is. It's not necessarily under major threat, even if perhaps it's still reversible at this current moment in time. So the battle is still ongoing between those who seek to restore the democratic transition and Kais Saied, who seeks to overturn it.
Okay, some interesting comments or points that you make. The curfew that you mentioned was announced according to the official statement, adopted to sort of curb the rise of COVID-19 cases, but it doesn't take much to realize that it also coincides with the anniversary marking the Arab Spring as well.
Some of the chants today on the protests were, were the status quo doesn't last. It's a famous Arab saying, "Al-hal la yadum." The status quo does not last. Bin Ali fell yesterday, Kais Saied falls today. And it's important to stress that Kais Saied was particularly worried because of the anniversary, because of the symbolism, because of this idea that 10 years ago or 11 years ago, Bin Ali fell in 2011 and fled to Saudi Arabia. But it's also important to stress that one of the biggest issues that is taking place in Tunisia today is not necessarily the efforts of the opposition or even the efforts of Kais Saied, but rather a people who continue to sit on the fence, who do not necessarily approve of Kais Saied's coup, but certainly do not want to return to the status quo that was there before Kais Saied embarked on his coup, in which you had a paralyzed parliament, or 10 years of a parliament that didn't produce much for the people. And I think that's the tragedy of what's unfolding, in that there is a hesitancy, in that while there is an acknowledgement that Kais Saied's coup is detrimental for democracy, the opposition has failed to inspire the people to restore a democracy in which they continue to play a major part in the manner they did before Parliament. And that's why the onus now is on the opposition to demonstrate that they've learned the lessons of the past, that they've heard the people who are upset with the conduct of Parliament beforehand, and to capitalize on that momentum. And I think that's what we saw today in terms of the lessons with regards to these protests, in that even though Kais Saied is scared, even though Kais Saied does not feel secure, even though Kais Saied deployed water cannons against the protesters, the opposition themselves remain deeply divided and do not command enough popular support to overturn him, as the people continue to sit on the fence.
I want to talk to you briefly about the opposition, point some light on the tragedy that you call. I mean, one of the major parties behind the protest, besides the Liberal Party that you mentioned, Ennahda, they held the most seats in Parliament before it's dissolved. What's next for the country's opposition?
Kais Saied has begun to target Ennahda leaders. Nuruddin El-beheiry, former justice minister, was kidnapped from in front of his house, taken to a secret detention center, and then rushed to hospital when he had a heart attack. The next plan, according to Kais Saied now, is to go after Ennahda, to go after its leaders, to put them under house arrest, to use them as the lightning rod for hatred, given that many people blame them for the crises or the tragedies, or for the crises at least, economic crises, given Ennahda have been a major player in the past 10 years. That's the fear for Ennahda. That's the fear for the opposition figures. That's the danger that Tunisia's democracy is facing, and that whatever you might feel about Ennahda, they remain an elected party. They remain the most successful party in the elections in Tunisia, in free and fair elections. That's the worry now that is taking place, in that the lack of significant pressure on Kais Saied, or rather the ability of Kais Saied to impose himself by force, exposes the opposition. And as we saw with Nuruddin El-beheiry, despite the media uproar over what happened with Nuruddin El-beheiry, he still hasn't been released. He's still in his hospital bed, and Saied will believe that the lack of international reaction to it suggests that perhaps he has a green card to go after them. And remember, he's being advised by Sisi, who managed to overthrow a democratically elected president, embark on fake elections, and got the world to recognize it. And today he's recognized as Egypt's president. Kais Saied is trying to adopt Sisi's model, and so far he will believe, so far so good.
Perhaps a tacit approval, like you say. Sami Hamdi, always good talking to you. Thank you very much.